the root of how we can help and share our genius zones and get all the goodness out. So yeah, that's so brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I just have to say I love your vibe.
Oh, thank you.
Just like so,
Gosh.
so fun and sassy. And I'm just like, I cannot wait to hear about all of your stuff because I feel like sometimes like finding that vibe is like few and far between.
Yeah, it's definitely an evolution, right? I mean, because what's funny is I remember a long time ago, my daughters would say to me, I mean, they're teenagers now, so 17, um, almost 16,
Wow.
and they when they were little, I mean, they were so close in age that I always had them in the double stroller, and in the very early stages, we only had one car before I was divorced, and so I just did everything on foot. And also, I trained them to sleep in, I mean, not train them, but for myself, I put them in the double stroller and I went out basically until they fell asleep, and then I stayed out for my own sanity until they woke up. And so then when they got a little older, they would say, "Mommy, will you please dress fancy?" Because I was always in I was always in sweat. You're not sweats, but what do you call them? You know, leg
Like,
workout stuff,
yeah,
And so I've evolved. I still wear the leggings, trust me, but yeah.
they're my wardrobe. Like it's funny because I feel like 95% of my pants are leggings.
Well, COVID had that gifted us COVID, right? But
I'm so fair.
I know, but so anyway, but no, I thank you. I'm also learning how to receive compliments, so
But hey, it's a skill. It's a skill.
it,
And you're role modeling really great things for your girls because that is like such a crucial thing that we don't showcase for them always.
no, exactly. And I often when I compliment them, I feel like that is also the same and not from a, you know, from a vanity standpoint, but just from
Yeah.
all the other things. It's like that's how that's how we heal ourselves, right? Because these are the things like if darling, if only you could see me through, you know, through my eyes. And so I've been really practicing that a lot most recently, but it's been a process because that's the thing is like we don't ever look into our own eyes and tell ourselves what a great job we're doing, and you know that you know we're still here, we're showing up. That is the investment that we give to ourselves and to our children, most importantly, I think. And that's part of my book is like if we want them to be healthy, we have to model that. We can't just say, oh, don't eat that, but what are they seeing us eat and do, you know? So
That is like so funny because I feel like I have these discussions a lot with people and they're like, well, I don't know why they won't take accountability. I don't know why they won't do this. I don't know why like they won't tell me the truth. And I'm just sitting there being like, huh, I wonder either where they learned the opposite behavior or where you didn't role model what you wanted them to see. And so a lot of the stuff is around like when I work with teens, it's like, sure, we can help support them in learning that. But if we're not doing that consistently throughout that to like help develop that skill, they're not going to do it.
oh, for sure.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, right. And no, I mean, of course not. And also, words are just noise. I mean, they don't even hear us. And you know, when we say those things, it's all about who we are being and our energy that we're bringing, and again, what we are modeling. And I learned a lot of that in my early years as a preschool teacher in the classroom, where I would, you know, sing the cleanup song, and then I would get so angry and so frustrated, like, why aren't they listening? Why aren't they, you know? And then when I actually started being what I needed them to do, like get down on the floor and start cleaning up the blocks, and that story is actually in my book because that's how I learned and grew. Like I had all the book knowledge, I had all the education, but
Yeah.
when it's not until you practice it, that analogy is you can't learn to swim by reading a book. So it's like, although I don't want to discourage people from getting my book, but at the same time, it's practice behavior. And so when I practice being, you know, getting down on their level and showing them what I need them to do is really how they learn and grow. And you know, fast forward to teenagers, the more we build that in their younger years, right? The easier it is when they're teenagers. And I still say that even as teenagers, it's never too late. I mean, it's always important to repair the relationship. And that a lot of times for me came through my own apologies, like recognizing my own, you know, where I overreacted and when I yelled and when I took out my stress on them, and I would just come to them, you know, and I would say, I'm sorry, you're right. You know, I realized that that was on me. That was my own stress and whatever, or being able to, and also that gives them permission to do that for themselves.
Yeah.
That's when I really get to revel in the fact that I'm not doing this like for them. I'm doing it for me, and then I get to see the benefit of the overflow when they come to me and then they're like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry I overreacted," or "I'm sorry I they're old enough now where they can articulate that because
Yes.
we've been practicing that for so long. But there were the younger years where there was just big emotions, and I also have a free gift if you're about the tantrums, the tantrum toolbox, and it's like I've noticed that in my work and in my experience, like we're always trying to control like the behavior, we're trying to control the situation, and it's like we don't ever just let it be, and sometimes that is hard to right to hold that space for however long, but those meltdowns, children are the closest to source and they are so in tune with they can't logically process what's happening, but
Right.
they just feel it through their body. So they fly on the ground and throw themselves around and cry and scream and dance, right? They're the most curious until we as adults squash it all because we're like, you need to fit in, be quiet and sit still and don't do that and share and it's just like that's not how we were born to live. And it's just been such a beautiful evolution to watch this growth and also to rediscover it in myself because my journey has taken many different paths as far as career wise. But I know in my heart, like when I listen to the voice that won't let me sleep, is you have to be able to share this global mission because parenting is universal. And I just read this most fascinating article in the New York Post that 47% of parents are keeping their struggles silent because of judgment and fear and shame and guilt. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we have to be the helpers, like get the message out that we're all struggling in different ways and there's no shame in asking for help. And especially as a single parent, like learning how to receive the help first of, like for asking for help and then receiving the help. But I'm here to say it's okay to do both.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, like that number is so high, and part of me is like definitely shocked by it, but then the other part of me is like I'm not shocked at all because I think that like even in my own parenting journey, my kids are younger, but even in my parenting journey, there's so much dismissiveness. They'll grow out of it. You'll be fine. Just keep doing it. You're a great mom. And like all of those are kind of like you can almost feel the palpable discomfort from that person about like you sharing this thing that you're struggling with. Right.
Yeah.
Which is why for me, when I'm working with a teen, because my entire caseload is pretty much like tweens and teens, and I love them. I'm obsessed with them. But I want the parents to get support too. And like who else but like the person who's literally seeing them every single week, who can like understand and translate, who can like help provide support and like, understanding in different behaviors. And like there are a lot of teen therapists and a lot of people that work with teens who are like, oh, I never talk to the parents. And it's like, why? Like you're missing out on this huge opportunity, not just to like offer in the moment support for the teen who's like in crisis because they're in a fight with their parents, but it's like actually helping the family system stabilize and move forward and have that evolution that you're talking about. Because like
Yes.
if you have a parent who's in pain and who's struggling and who's going through a grieving process and whatever, and that none of that's ever acknowledged, it's just gonna fester.
Yes, the fester and the resentment that builds.
Yeah.
That is often not talked about, right? It's just swept under the rug, all the resentment that builds. And I have a part in that book I said where, we start out being pushed around in a stroller and if we're lucky, I mean, and then we often end up being wheeled around, as we age and in our elder years. And if we haven't healed that resentment with our children, then, you want someone that's going to show up with devotion and purity without the resentment. Like instead of showing up with like resentment, it's a whole health of the family unit. Like we can't just talk to one and not the other. And I mean, it's the energy in the whole house.
Well, and I think you bring up a really valid point because I feel like we all have different experiences of being parented that were good, bad, negative, positive, neutral, whatever you want to say, right? Some people feel like they were neglected, abandoned, hyper fixated on, overseen too much. They had like a helicopter parent, any of those things. And when you think about like those experiences as a teen, right? Whatever that was, if it wasn't acknowledged, if it wasn't healed, if it wasn't supported, if it wasn't seen and heard, then you have those teens that are now raising teens that are unable to kind of like process through like why they're resentful about their kid getting everything if they had nothing, or like why should I spend all this time with you when like I didn't get that, like my teen self didn't get that. And so like if we're just ignoring the parents and ignoring them as part of treatment, like we're not offering them true help and healing either. We're just being like, we'll fix your kid, which is also the wrong narrative
Yes.
in therapy anyway.
Yes. Oh, for sure. I mean, essentially, we are all just grown-up children. I mean, we're children in these adult bodies,
Yeah.
that haven't really had, I mean, unless you actually are doing the work or that, and that's why, the first pillar is awareness. It's like once we become aware as adults, because we can have that logical brain to actually take responsibility to do that kind of work. But it's just like you said, it's they didn't get that and I turned out fine. But the root of it is really, are you fine? Because look at, the behavior and the feelings and the energy that you're bringing, that we bring into raising our children. And then the other, thing is like, oh, when I have a child, that's going to make everything better. And it's like, actually, it's the trigger because then we get to see
Yes.
where those pieces were missing. And then the adult, we get caught up in all of the grown-up responsibilities, right? Work, chores, bills, stress, physical health, aging parents, whatever it is. And then we can't meet the needs of our little ones because we're all focused on all of the other adult things. So that's the other trickle down effect, right? If we don't heal the leader of the house, then how can we lead with that whole heart? I mean, yes, the children and the teens need the support, but the adults, there's a gap if we don't heal the leader.
Yeah. Well, and at least show like I think too, like I think therapy is something that everyone should be in and out for the rest of their lives. Like I'm just a very strong proponent of it. I'm like, why wouldn't you want self-reflection and like self-development? But I think in terms of that too, it's like the work that we do with teenagers is something that we can then pass on to parents about how we're successful with them. So like I had
Yes.
a kid at one point who was like really struggling in their relationship with their parents, and like the parents were like, we know nothing, this kid does not talk to us about anything. It took a while to kind of build a strong enough rapport for me to kind of press on certain things and get a check in on like where things were going. And then over the course of like the next year and a half with that, I actually like we figured out kind of the keys to all of these things. And like obviously with the team's permission, I was like, can I share some of these things with like your parents to like, help support you in the home? And they were things that obviously the parents had to practice, and it was like not an overnight learned skill. But
Yes.
within 2 years, their entire relationship had shifted. And I wasn't trying to mimic what the parents were saying. It's like, you need to talk to your parents. And it's like, no, like that actually is not helpful guidance. I want to understand you and I want to help support you in having those conversations with your parents and like helping them learn you in that way, and how, you need things to be and what's the barrier for it, right? And so in the
Right.
process, I was able to kind of learn and teach with the parents to show what curiosity looks like and
Yes.
what like gentle reflection looks like and what all these skills are. But if I were just to tell you on day one of like, this is how you reflect, this is how you take accountability, that's one of those things that you have to practice. Like you had said, like you can't learn to swim from a book, which I love that saying.
Thank you. Yes, it is true. And I do say that parenting is a practice and I practice it every day. I mean, and I mess up and then I course correct because I'm learning. And especially now, because that's the thing. It's like every age and stage is different. And even us as adults, we are growing as adults also. Like I've never been this age and stage in my adult life. So I'm growing, right? I mean, I'm in my 50s now, and so like I've never felt like to be in my 50s. So they don't know what it feels like to be in their teens. We just have the experience of what it felt like for us to be a teenager back in my day, and that's not helpful. And my kids are telling me that, and I'm learning that. Like it's not helpful, and we want them to obviously grow and learn and save them from the mistakes that we made, but we can only be there to support, let them have their journey and to listen. And I found like that communication is one of my pillars, and communication is not, it's not only what we say, right? It's really listening is a huge piece to that. And what I've learned through the listening piece, and especially now as teenagers, I often say, am I just listening, or do you want some feedback or some support? Do we want to workshop how we can solve some of these issues? And sometimes they'll lead with, you're just listening. And I'm like, okay, because the instinct is like, I want to fix and support and give solutions. And
But we can't do it for them. like we can be there as a cheerleader in the background and a support and as a space to like help solve problems and to offer suggestions. But like at the end of the day, we don't want to create a dependency on us as providers, as parents, as whatever, because eventually they're going to be out in the world by themselves in whatever term that is. And we want
Yeah.
them to have those skills.
Yes, teaching them the skills on being able to face these difficult conversations. I've said this a lot of times that my kids are these social emotional skills. Most adults don't have the capacity to have difficult conversations, like honest conversations, instead of going to their other friend and saying like, oh, that, talking about their other friend instead of going directly to the friend and saying, what's going on here. Grown-ups avoid hard conversations just as much as teenagers do, right? So, and that's being able to modeling that for them to learn how to embrace that and embody those conversations and that type of holistic health, because it really is a process. And if they have those skills that they've learned through experience and haven't been role modeled and even role playing, so they get familiar or comfortable, and they can work out, behind the scenes at home, and then they have that environment because, we become our environment, right? They always say you become the five closest people you hang around with. And so if you have a healthy environment at home to practice those things, you can go out into the world to experience those conversations and then learn that this went well, this didn't go well. I want to do it this way next time.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back for a second too, because I think you had said something really helpful where there's always parents that are like, well, back in my day. And I think the thing about that that's so unhelpful is like when I think about teens nowadays, I'm not that old. The teen experience right now is so 1,000% different from how I was even like brought up as a teen that they're not comparable. They're really not. But I do think that the lessons we learn as teenagers and the personal experiences that we have had are things that like we can share with our kids as journeys, not just about like I made this mistake too and here's what I learned, but also like giving them insight into like you as a teenager are vastly different from you as an adult now who's parented two children, gone through career changes, done all these different things, right? Like
Yes.
it shows the full spectrum of that. And I think that there's like something really fun about being able to share experiences you had as like a teenager, as a teenager, as whatever, to be like, yeah, like I went through this, I made this horrible decision, I whatever, because then they can see too, you're just a human. Like,
Oh, for sure. That I think is the biggest. I mean, if nothing else, like we are human too. And that is so brilliant that you said that because we are just human too. And that's why I say like apology is like one of the biggest, apologize and forgive are critical in this element, especially as teenagers, because there's so much happening in their world. And it's not even about us. And that's a lot of the things. I mean, and sometimes, my kids will be like, it's not about you, mom. Because whatever the situation is, and I think, oh, I'm taking it personally or whatever, and there is so much going on for them. It is so not the same as it was when we were growing up. Fundamentally, the core of, being seen and heard and loved and safe and worthy, those are fundamentals that never go away. The timing of the society, the phones and the social media and the peers and the way what they wear, all of the school pressure. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's totally different. It's so insane that we really need to soften it, a little bit more. And that's why I also talk about the connected parent is also about the presence, being present versus the pressure. When it comes to school and stuff like that, I mean, I don't know how people will take this or whatever, but I just say I don't judge you based on a letter grade, but the system does. It's a system. And so it doesn't
so
matter, we all learn. School was very difficult for me, and none of these diagnoses now were not popular or common, even acknowledged back then. So I just say all this to say is that there's so much pressure on our teenagers now that it's so important that we are present for them to listen and to be less critical as much as possible. I know that sounds easy, right? It's like these are simple solutions, but they're not easy, and it just takes practice. And also, in our house, we curb sarcasm because sarcasm comes out like as a defense mechanism. And so it sounds like all fun and game, but really it's hurtful. It's like undermining. And so when we noticed it, it was like, oh, that was sarcasm. So it's not who we intend for them to become, right? We are present enough to be aware of what we're saying because the words do matter. and the energy behind it matters. And so,
There is a visual I had. I feel like when you had mentioned like being present and not pressure. That is such a beautiful saying because I feel like even to think about the grades. When you have a kid, let's say 12, 13, 14, really any time from that on up, they are so in tune with their environment. They're like seeing the social dynamics, they understand why people are treated certain ways. They like are trying to make sense of the world. And then
yes,
at the same time that they're learning that new skill and trying to figure out the world, we're like, oh hey, by the way, you also have to study for 17 tests and take all this homework and do all this and play a sport and be number one in violin and like whatever. So then at the end of the day, when you have a parent who's like, Johnny, I'm so upset with you that you didn't get an A on this test. Like, I don't think you reached your full effort. And you have a kid, they like, did you ask how his day was? Did you ask how the material was? Did you inquire and like try to be curious about anything that he was struggling with? Like, did his girlfriend that you didn't know about break up with him at school that day? Right.
yeah.
Like there's all these other pieces that are happening. And I think that we jump into you didn't meet the target, right? Which then we have kids that are attached to that as a self-worth piece
Oh,
versus
yes.
being like, hey, like every day we have different battles that we are facing. And like some days we win and some days we lose.
Yes.
And like, how do you keep showing up, right? And how do you learn from the decisions you've made, the experiences you've had that makes you 1% better the next day?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, my heart goes out to these kids. It's just when I was taking my teenagers to school, they're in high school now, and it's right in the same parking lot as the elementary school. There is just 1,000-degree difference between the kindergartners and the TKers that, their backpacks are bouncing behind them and they're running and they're skipping and they're laughing and they're smiling and they're just full of joy and curiosity and wonder and then the older they get, like the head is down, their shoulders are shrugging. No smiling, no eye to eye contact with people. Everybody's on their phone and walking to school and drinking these giant drinks. And I'm just like, I just feel I'm so empathetic. I can just feel all of the weight of the world and trying to figure it out. And like you said, did you even ask about everything else that was going on? Because that's where I was coming back to is that we can say that that parents, that we have this unconditional love for our kids, and yet we have these expectations, maybe these unspoken expectations. And so if those expectations aren't met, that is an energetic conditional love. And they feel that. So that's a lot more behind the scenes, especially with teenagers, because there's just so much pressure. And then is that, oh, am I a bad parent if they got a bad grade? Or am I a bad parent if I if they did or didn't do whatever? And so
Well, and that's the thing too. Like I feel like I really work with parents to try to separate their parenting quality from their kids' choices. And like, how can we help them learn because like I made crap decisions when I was in high school. Are you kidding? And I had parents that were like well educated. There was a lot of like stuff going on, but like I absolutely made bad choices when I was in high school. I think most of us probably did at some point or another. We have to sometimes separate ourselves from like other people's choices and be like, I can love you and not like what you do and be frustrated that you made that choice, but like still love you. But how can we work together to like really figure out what you want to do going forward? How do you want to deal with this? Because as a parent, you can't rescue them from everything. Right.
right.
And like you have a kid, 12 and up, who's like literally a living, breathing, thinking human that has their own train of thought, their own things on their mind, their own priorities. And your
Yes.
your kid might just be super into like other things and not want to study for science. Then they need a bad grade in science. What does that mean? How do we kind of like extrapolate that to the rest of their lives? Like we've certainly had a lot of people that haven't done well in school that are amazing Luke Vogue people that have gone on to do like lead multi-million-dollar businesses with like plumbing and all this other stuff. So like
Yes.
really helping us understand this is such a short period of time. And I think for me the essence of it is the relationship. Like I heard someone at some point say that like at 18 you got your report card, right, as a parent, because that is really the day where you get your kid is deciding whether or not they want that relationship with you long term.
Oh my gosh, yes. What you said is so critical because we have this tiny, I said that in my book too. We have this tiny window of time while they are under our roof, essentially, and little and growing and into the teens, and then they're off if especially they're off if they don't feel seen or safe or worthy at home, right? They're definitely going to be seeking external validation in the world if they don't feel that at home. And yeah, we just have this tiny window of time, and that's why being present over the pressure of it, and that looks different for everybody. So there, I mean, again, I'm not coming from a judgment standpoint of how, everyone is doing it. I just know from my experience and my education and all the parents that I've worked with, I've seen it go both ways. And and I often people say, "Oh, you're so lucky your kids want to spend time with you." And I'm like, it's not luck. Like I practice it every day.
I'm so glad you said that because I think that there are a lot of people that don't understand the work and the effort and the consistency and the showing up and the regulation and all the stuff that goes into like maintaining a really strong, healthy relationship with your team. And the thing too is that they're going to push you away. They're going to be rude. They're going to be nasty. They're going to be
Yes.
mean, right? There's all these things that are there. And I always tell the kids I work with, it's like, you can say and do whatever, and I'm not offended. Because if I take it personally, then I'm impacting my own ability to show up and be what that person needs me to be in that moment when we're in session. So like I have one kid who like has just was very creative in the beginning and would call me all of these like horrible whatever names. And there's so many people that would be like, that's disrespectful. But you know what? I didn't correct him because I was like, and I would always be like, oh, like what made you think that? Right. Like that was always kind of my follow-up question and like really wanting to understand. But that was just his method of trying to like push me away because that's what worked with other therapists.
Right.
Right. Because he could trigger a therapist instantly by calling them a fuck face or like whatever, insert,
Yes.
whatever is here. And so for me, I was like, okay, like what is that about? Where did that one come from? And then it became this like reliving all these times that he was really like in pain and wanted to offend and make other people hurt and also didn't want to be in therapy because he didn't want to talk about it.
Right.
Right. So it helped all this like really awesome stuff to come out because I just was like so unresponsive.
Well, and that's so key to parenting, right? Because that's what we do. We're reacting. We're taking it personally. But if we don't react, if we're able to just pause and respond and reflect and ask curious questions, I mean, and that takes immense practice, especially when it's your own child, but it's so worth it. And one piece to this puzzle for me that I've learned is mealtime is critical in my opinion. And it is such a solid foundation. It's an opportunity to connect. Every meal is an opportunity to connect because that is something, especially when I was going through my divorce, is that I was so consistent with mealtime that we would still consistently have a sit down dinner together. And I say it like it doesn't have to be fancy. It's not even if we got takeout or whatever, because I hear that there's so much pressure and stress and all the things. But even if you get takeout, sitting down together as a family, it is brings us together every single day. And for us, the meal is dinner. It does, whatever meal can work for your family. But sometimes there's so much heaviness going on, and my kids will be like, "I'll tell you at dinner," or because they know that no matter, and even if I like there was a different schedule and I had to eat by myself, they would come to the table and we'd sit together to eat. Or if one of them was going to eat and I wasn't going to eat, I would all sit together. And now, we're texting, we're like, are you going to be home at whatever, like it's just been such a built-in safe space where we talk about everything, and it's not, we're not always bringing our good mood to the table. Let me tell you,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
there's there's been, some deep heaviness. There's been tears and laughter and joy and there's also been, the hard stuff. And but that's just kind of been like the root of our connection is being able to say, if you need to fuck off at the table, it's okay to say it, like or sometimes silence, right? Even silence is a conversation, where if there's anger between this, my siblings are, I mean, my daughters are siblings that are close in age. So two teenagers, two girls, there's a lot going on. And of course, I want to be the peacemaker. And at the end, and a lot of times I just listen and I'll listen to both sides and thank you for sharing. Like there's nothing for me to, how to communicate when you're ready, you guys will work it out, whatever. So interfering a lot is not always good either. But the root of that is a mealtime together. And there are studies shown that sitting down together as a family can bring you closer.
Well, I think for me, what it rings true to is consistency and showing up, right? And
Mhm.
like, there's so much about the world that is chaotic, so much about our lives that are chaotic, so many things we can't control. And if we have that one space every day that we know that we can depend on, where we can fall apart and we can have those hard conversations and we can cry and we can laugh and we can share good news, that is going to be an outlet. A mealtime, whether it's a book before bedtime, whether it's like eating breakfast, taking a walk together every day, right?
Yes.
any of those spaces can be flexible depending on your type of family and, where you're at, what you're
Absolutely.
doing.
And I will add, which I didn't mention, but I think that this is the major key to that mealtime. And like you said, it could be a walk, whatever, is that it's zero screens. There is zero screens at the table because that's how we maintain the consistency of being present. And even, like going for a walk, we're not on our phones. Like you said, if it's breakfast time, and that is one of my pillars too, is consistency because it is key. And that is how we develop the safety that they need, is we are being consistent. And boundaries is another one of my pillars. And it's because they don't have to like the boundary, but it needs to be in place. And that's the thing. And they'll push back on it all the time. But that's okay because that's how they know that we are going to be there no matter what. We're going to show up and we're going to hold the line no matter what. Even on the hard times and even as a single parent when I'm exhausted and whatever, I still am consistent and I still hold through with the boundaries. And it's not just one thing, right? It's building the strengths of all of these pillars, that the root of connection, which is what our teens are craving. They are craving that human connection. And if they don't have it at home, they will seek it externally, in their peer group or in the scrolling or in the gaming or in the, hopefully no other toxic behaviors. But, again, as adults, if we're modeling that, it's going to be really easy for them to follow suit.
Totally. Well, and I want to touch on the boundary piece too, because I feel like a lot of people, parents talk about boundaries. They always, I think, have this perspective, and maybe it's a societal thing that boundaries are negative. Boundaries are negative. It's a bad thing to have them. It's, whatever. But we have to think about boundaries as being held. So when I have a boundary about something, I am holding that space in a very clear and consistent way. So I work with a lot
100%.
of parents who struggle because their kids are really high risk. They're engaged in a lot of like not great extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
They're dealing with crisis after crisis, mental health crisis, all these things that are coming up. And I had a parent a while ago who was like, their kid was like out of control, was like assaultive towards them in the home, was like doing all these like really negative things. And when I would ask the parents, like, what about boundaries, right? With where where are we at with this? They'd be like, well, I don't want to take this thing away from them. I don't want to pull them out of school. I don't want to like whatever. And I was like, so you're role modeling in that moment, right? That thing is more important than their boundary for safety, your boundary as a parent, and that like it doesn't matter,
A
right?
100%.
And so I feel like when we're talking about boundaries, boundaries are safe. Boundaries are safe, right?
Yes,
And so when we have boundaries as parents, as providers, as whoever, teachers who's working with kids, they know what to expect. Sure, they might push them,
of
but the
course.
more consistent we are with it, the better off we're going to be with it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, even when I was teaching preschool and I had parent conferences, and I would have to share, obviously, what was happening in the classroom with the child. And when I sat down with the parents, they said, well, we set up our house so we didn't have to tell him no. I was just like, well, how is that going to serve him in the world? That, how is that leading? So we had to workshop through that because that's a huge growth piece. If you're not ever told no in your home because of whatever reason, that's just not logical as an adult. So boundaries are there for, obviously all of the reasons. And yes, it doesn't mean that they're going to like them, but that is how we lead and how we support them actually. And that teaches them they can actually hold the boundary. It actually can give them some sort of satisfaction that they know that they can be responsible enough to, or the natural and logical consequences of, of either breaking the boundary or not, so
Well, and having a boundary that you don't like also allows you to navigate distress tolerance because that's another skill that we have to have because we are going to be told no. We're going to be told we can't do that. We're going to be told all these things. If we don't have the skill for distress tolerance, we are going to struggle so hard in adapting to life outside of our like parents' houses.
yes. Oh my gosh. And even my own parents, I remember, my mom and dad would argue like because I hear, parents, I just want to be their friend. My dad would say, "Well, you're the mom. You're not the friend. You're the mom." And I'm like, "I'm parent first. Mom second." But yes, I am the leader. I am the role model of that. And so it's like that's where boundaries also come in. Is like we don't want to just be their friend and not have any boundaries. And also, it's important to have boundaries with your friends, right? And that otherwise we become, right, the people pleaser or the all the other things that aren't healthy for ourselves. I just think that that is so critical, what you said, that we have to be able to have this tolerance, just like having hard conversations. It's a skill that you have to practice. So you practice saying no, practice learning how to have that tolerance of receiving the no. And it's just like, if you go on a job interview and you get the no, there's so many no's in life, right? That we want to be able to.
I worked in a variety of residential programs, and I really loved residential work. It's one thing that I miss so much, but like I'm just not in a place where I can go back to it. But in residential work, we always had the kid that was kind of like routinely being like, I'm just gonna kill myself. I don't want to be here. I'm just gonna run away. I'm whatever. And early in my clinical journey for residential programming, I was like, so what do you do with that? Right. When you have a kid who's routinely being like, I'm just gonna kill myself, I'm just gonna kill myself, like saying goodbye to the staff and like going through that whole process. And for me, what I realized is I'm such a workable human in terms of like, I will do whatever is necessary to like help you cope and help keep you in the least restrictive environment, but I'm also not going to let you kill yourself. And that is a thing where I'd always said to people where it's like I can help you with a lot of things, but I can't bring you back from the dead. And so
Right.
I had said to every teen I work with, I was like, I am okay if you hate me for the rest of my life, the rest of your life, if as long as you're alive. And so with this kid, a few kids in particular, they had transitioned from other residential programs. It didn't really have strong containers and boundaries around like how we use language and what that means. And so I had kids who would be like, well, I'm just going to kill myself and I'm going to do this and you can't stop me. And then it became this thing where it's like when you said that, there was a direct response to that, right? It was like, okay, great, let's call crisis, let's get you assessed, let's get you in the next level of care, right? Because it was one of those things where I wasn't going to mess around with it. And so they had to learn really quickly that like one of my boundaries was that we're going to use words like appropriately. And if you're really freaking mad about something, that's okay, that's valid, right? We
Yes.
can have that conversation. You can be so pissed about this decision that like somebody else made, but when you get to the point where you're saying like I'm going to kill myself, you're assaulting people, you're whatever, you have like lost the ability, right, to like adhere to that boundary, and I have to keep you safe.
Yes. 100%. That's huge in being able to manage that whole situation and hold the space, not call the bluff, but hold the boundary. And
But in some ways it was a bluff, right? Because they wanted to see what you were going to do and if you were going to hold to your boundary. So like I had a variety of kids who would be like, I'm going to test this. And then what did I do? I'd be like, okay, great, let's get you assessed, let's do this. And it was the same process every time.
And see, and that's again going back to the consistency piece, because I've also had parents say, well, I've tried everything and nothing works. And I'm just like, well, that's part of the problem. You're trying everything, you're not consistent, you're not holding the boundary. It's just like, right, if you give the kid the candy every single time they cry, of course, or you say no, and then you walk away and they're still crying, you say no, and you say right, and then they give in, give in, give in, or whatever it is, it's not holding the boundary. So in that space, like you said, you would do whatever it takes, but I can't bring you back from the dead. It's the same thing with a toddler tantrum. If they're throwing themselves on the ground, you do whatever it takes. Like I'm going to let you throw it around until you are done screaming and crying, and still the answer is no, and that's okay.
Well, and
You
that's
know.
the thing. I'm going to sit with you while you're
Yep.
experiencing this intense emotion. I'm going to
Yes.
sit with you. I'm willing to sit in this with you and let you experience this emotion. And then I will be there to support you, to cuddle you, to like offer you whatever, and know that it's really freaking hard,
a
right?
hundred
But that
percent.
doesn't mean it's going to change my answer, but I'm willing to sit in it with you.
Exactly. And that's part of my tantrum toolbox is that like one of the things is I would just sit on the floor with my arms open for however long it took. And that's where I'm going to meet your mess because I'm going to hold that space and I'm not going to try to change that behavior and diminish the feeling until you process it through. I'm going to be here to hold it. And as hard as it is for me and sometimes tears would come out for me because it's like, wow, my child is in so much pain. And that's okay. These are actual feelings that are processed that we need to move through instead of diminish them and ignore them or brush them under the or you're fine or you're going to be okay or stop crying. It's like no, these are real valid emotions and I'm going to hold that space for as uncomfortable as long as it is and and then and I also like to use the analogy as like a cat. because a cat will come over and then we push them they want to come over and we ignore them and they crawl, scratch your leg and scratch your leg and scratch your leg, and then finally you pick up the cat and then they're like, oh, thank you for being here, and then they go away like they're totally fine. So it's we are all human nature, right? We're mammals. That's the thing. It's like we need that support. We need to know that someone's going to hold that space and show up for you, and yes, call the bluff or hold the boundary, be consistent. I mean, that's like it's not like rocket science, but it's the true connection that we've gone so far away from because we've gotten into the hustle culture of we have to do more, and we're out there doing instead of actually being present with whatever comes up. And it does it can be exhausting, and that's why like the self-care of that's why when I said I put my kids in the stroller and I went for a walk because I that was my self-care at when they were little. Now that obviously they're older, so I do different things. I don't put them in the stroller anymore, but I still go do, self-care is so important, especially as a single parent. But they grow into these new ages and stages, it's even more critical to be holding the boundary and keeping the consistency and holding the space and being, listening and the natural and logical consequences and building trust. They see that and they feel that because I've been so consistent.
Well, I think like obviously it sounds so easy, right? To
Yeah.
just I just do all these things, right? But
Yeah.
we all have to recognize too that like as humans we're on our own human journey, we have different strengths and skills. There is literally no shame in getting help and support on like a little thing that you're struggling with or a big thing you're struggling with or any of that, and that you don't have to do it alone, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
people are trying to build resources now because I don't want a parent to be in that by themselves,
Of
right? I
course.
don't want them to be so lost that they're like, I'm just going to give up and it doesn't matter, my kid hates me anyway, right?
Yes.
Like there's so much that can change between a 6 month, a year, 2 years of like work and effort on like very small things, right? Like when I think you were talking about parents who come to you and say that like nothing works, right? I've tried everything, and I immediately thought of like I love to bake, I'm a huge baker, and so I thought about the idea of like sometimes try new recipes, right? I'm like
Yes.
on a mission to like find this like perfect thing, and if I just every time tried an entirely different recipe, I'm not actually learning anything, right? I have to tweak little parts of the recipe to figure out like, okay, like how do I make this happen? And how do I make this happen? And where is it? And then you build a new recipe over time, right? And I
Yes.
think about the same thing with kids where it's like, you can't walk in every day and have a brand new behavioral plan that you just thought of miraculously overnight and then introduce it to them and be like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. Because you just threw out the baby with the bathwater and you're just like starting, like, why are we recreating the wheel every time?
Oh my gosh, I love that baking analogy. That is so true. I always go to like the gym. I'm like, I'm not going to get abs and just because I go to the gym one time. I mean, I'm just like and I'm going to tweak the routine, but I'm going to keep consistent with it. It's like I love that baking analogy. It's so true. And it is a practice. And what you said before about getting help. And I go back to this, it's the same sort of thing. Like we invest in fitness trainers to improve our body. We
Yeah.
invest in a nutritionist to help with our, with our health and wellness. We invest in a mechanic for our car. We invest in a CPA for our, it's like there
Yeah.
is there's so much stigma on getting help for parents and beyond like the clinical therapist, which is valid and needed and so important in mental health department, but also just if not just but if there's like the little problems that are daily, then I think that's where parenting coaching can come in and getting the expertise and the help and the people that like we've been through it, we've been we not only have the education behind it but we have the experience and the skills behind it that is just so different. I mean, most parents, they have never been around children beyond their family, if they had siblings or not. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like we only know what we were as a child from our own parent. But I mean, I think the demographic of people that have actually been around children or been in that environment and learned from other children in other environments and actually studied it. It's a smaller population, than like the normal career of going down, the path of whatever those normal careers are. But I just think that there's a smaller percentage of people that have been around a lot of children to see the benefits and the real connection that can be built based on some of the foundations of the pillars and the things that you are also mentioning, like the consistency and the boundaries and the presence. It's like, and I think that that's also the difference of growing up 40 years ago versus just less distraction. There's so many things that pull us away from being present with our children. I mean, I started working with children when I was a child myself because I've been like some people, like it's born, like you said, some things people are naturally good at some things and naturally better at other things. And that has always been a gift of mine. And so it does seem like my normal is some person's hard. And some person's hard for me is they're easy. So
Yeah.
that's why I think that it's so important to stress to normalize getting help as a parent and normalize getting help for the teen or age and stage you're in is it's just so critical. And also what you said about we're not alone. Because in the ancient history of days, they grew up in villages.
I was
They had
just
the
thinking
support.
that.
They were in community. They had the healers and they had the community and they had everybody had their role, right? And there was the mother of all and there was the support and they had a village to take care of them. And as Americans especially have gotten away from, the generational, the housing, like, when you become an 18, you move out. But in other cultures, they're still however they were raised, right? But still, we had that community built in. And so, again, we've gotten so far off our ancestors of community that it's so important to let people know that the community is here and we're willing to help. And it's important to reach out because you don't have to suffer in silence. And,
Well, and no kid comes with an instruction manual. And we're all dealing with our own sense of healing from stuff that happened in the past and like working through it. And it takes time and effort and commitment. And like, it's a very small stage of life.
very small stage of life and it's such a small window to be able to build that connection so early before it's not too late but it's just it will take a different type of healing and reconnecting if we're not practicing along the way. I mean, and then another good analogy is like my dad learned to swim when he retired in his 50s. That's
Wow.
a lot harder to go back
Yeah.
than when you're so I'm just saying like it's not impossible when we get the help sooner than later you have a greater chance of less resentment, less pain, less hurt, and really practicing forgiveness for ourselves and for others and just that compassion and grace piece is so critical I think because I know I have my own, we have our own story, the stories that we tell, then the meaning that we make of them, that is the loop that plays until we become conscious of it to be able to stop it. And that's what we don't want to pass on to our kids. So being able to support our kids in the journey and holding that space is so critical.
I was
That
going to say too, like, I think the narrative that we give our kids about them as children, them in struggles, them working through crisis is like so crucial to how they understand themselves in those situations. And like, it is easier to do it right the first time than it is to do it wrong 75 times. Right. Like, and so like, I think about that a lot. Like I had this girl I started with who was 15 when she started seeing me and she had been through 7 therapists, I think, by the time she was 15. And by that point, I was frustrated as a provider because I was like, man, I wish you had been here with me 2 years ago. Right.
right.
There are so many things that like we could have done and worked through and the support the parents would have had. But like instead, we spent a lot of time going backwards and like really trying to like fix and repair the stuff that like well-intentioned, untrained, like therapists had on like this kid and her family. um and so it's disheartening sometimes and it's like, okay, cool, you're a provider, you should be like doing no harm, and here you are like doing the opposite of that, but like unknowingly because you're so untrained and working with certain populations and diagnoses and whatever. And then she had this narrative that she's like, I'm a failure because no one can fix me. And that was a narrative the parents had had because that's what the narrative they were getting from the therapist. So it was this whole thing where I was like, I just, I wish people could get help in the beginning and get and like find the right resources for them that like actually address the problems they're having versus being someone being like, yeah, I can totally work with that, but they have no experience.
Oh, yes. Right. Well, that sounds like coming from ego.
Well, and that's the thing. And I like, I always say I work with teens, I specialize in teens. Could I work with someone who's an elder? Sure. Would I be good at it? No.
Yeah.
Do I have the knowledge that I would need to work with someone tomorrow who is like, let's say in their 80s? Absolutely
Yeah.
not. Right. I would need supervision. I would need training. I would need like on the job stuff. I would need like the iterations of older people to kind of like see and work with. But I don't have any of that.
Yeah. That's like saying, the heart surgeon's going to go do knee surgery. You know what I mean? Like, I could probably do it because I studied, it in medical school, but but do I specialize in knee surgery? No, I specialize in heart surgery. And, but there is help for all the spectrums. And I would always say that I'm an infant toddler preschool specialist because I spent 20 years doing that. And I have grown into all of those experiences as we age and stage with my own children.
Yeah.
And so, plus all the research and, all the education and the ages and stages. And I was just thinking that there is help and support for wherever you're at, as long as you are willing to go get it, you know, and not feel the shame and the judgment and the fear of unknowns. It's better to go in and get the support and get that community, that village that that we used to have. So I totally agree with that. I mean, I think that's really great, and we all need the support. Like you said, it should be normalized to be able to have that kind of support.
I've loved talking with you today. So I'm curious though. Tell me more about your book. Tell me about your business. Tell me about all of that stuff.
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you for holding the space. I'm so grateful to meet you as well. I know I always say that this is how we know we're in the right place, when we could just talk for hours about support and helping and all of our experiences. And so I wrote and I'm so grateful that because this has been on my heart for decades and all of the different experiences. It's called The Connected Parent: How to Raise Children Who Feel Seen, Safe, and Worthy. And it is based on the 7 pillars of parenting alignment that out of all the education and experience and research, I've really came down to this framework of 7 pillars. And I can give away the third pillar, which is the throat chakra communication, a free chapter of my book to your audience if they want to, or I can give you the link tree
Yeah.
to I have the tantrum toolbox, picky eater playbook, I have a mealtime masterclass, and then this book. And it really did come from years of experience in the preschool classroom, years of experience working with different parents. And now I am opening up my parenting coaching practice. So I am available for private one-on-one coaching, and I am going to be opening up group coaching. And part of the statistics that I read in this New York Post was that 2 times a week minimum that parents had no idea what to do, and that they didn't want to get the help, or they wanted like a parenting anonymous. And so I thought, well, you could, once you got into the cohort, you could see how many parents want to be anonymous, but yet we're all have a similar struggle. I
Yeah.
mean, that's why the struggles are not, they're not secret struggles. Everybody's going through the same struggles, but we want to, it's like that facade, right? It's the mask that we wear. The front of the mask is the perfection, but behind the closed doors is, it's falling apart. So I just want people to know that if you got into the group coaching, you would not be alone. There's everybody's going through the same thing, maybe different age and stage, but it's out there. And so my business, the umbrella, is called Home and Harmony Parenting. And what I learned, it really does start at home. Like we want to blame, everything, the system, weather, schools, government, but really it's an inside job. It starts at home. And then when I pivoted into real estate, because I've been in real estate, and as a military spouse, and we moved 7 times in 10 years, and I really realized that it's like, if we don't have harmony in our home, how can we expect to have that out in our world? And so that's where the home and harmony parenting, that's how my name kind of evolved. It was just like, I realized that it was all coming from home. I love being in home and I love houses. And I just thought it was just like the perfect segue to build my business into home and harmony parenting. So that's the umbrella. And then the connected parent is my book. And it was a #1 bestseller and or new release in Amazon in 2 categories. Um,
What?
Yeah, teen and maturing adults and divorce. So I thought, and really it was interesting because it's not like specific to those topics, but it's the essence of the conversations. And as a single parent, I mean, I am one, so I can only write it from that perspective. But yeah, and I really wrote it so it would be easy to read.
Can I just tell you, I'm gonna buy your book because I can't wait to read this. But like that is one thing that I appreciate so much that people have knowledge they want to share. But I feel like at the end of the day, when I have a parent who's like sobbing on the bathroom floor because their kid told them to fuck off for the 17th time that day and they don't know what to do and their kid is in crisis, whatever, they don't have freaking time to read a 350-page book.
This is relationships. It's not just the age and stage of our teenagers or, our infants, but this is a framework for every relationship. And I was out with a friend at dinner and he was like, "Yeah, we'll go through the pillars with me." And because I'm like, this is applicable for every relationship. We want to have boundaries. We want to have communication. We need to have compassion and grace and awareness. And I'm going out of order because I do feel like they are in alignment with our, this might be woo-woo for some, but the whole chakra system, right? Our whole nervous system is, when we're out of alignment, things aren't working, right? But when we're in alignment, like we have, oh, like everything flows and all the days go, great. And of course, we're not going to stay in full alignment every single day because we're human. But when we can recognize when we're out of alignment and, oh, okay, I see why. And oh, I can adjust there. But like these are relationship pillars that that can keep our connection, because even as adults, we want to be seen. We want to feel safe. We want to be heard. Want to feel worthy. I mean, because that's where
These are
that's
lifetime skills.
yeah,
They just start when you're really little, but they're
exactly.
lifetime skills.
And if we aren't meeting those needs when we're little, that's why I say like we're just the grown-up version of that. We're
Yep.
still seeking that, and most of the adults are walking around like in ego, like we're trying to experience this external validation because at whatever age and stage those needs weren't met. And it's not like, like our parents were doing the best that they could. I want to give the benefit of the doubt that everybody's doing the best that they can with like people can only meet you where they're at. That's really the bottom line. And so that's why we're all, like on this journey, like we're here in these human vessels to experience. And so if we can experience these core values and this framework, then it really does lead to that connection that we deeply desire to have with our children.
And even
I
if
mean,
they say no, it's the relationship they desire to have with their parents that has to feel safe. It has to be something that they can trust, right? So, like, again, back to all the pillars.
these pillars embody trust. They really do. But, because, and that I think also does come with the consistency and the boundaries, because that the children can trust that you're going to show up,
Well,
even
and
on
that's the thing, like, you don't have to show up perfect, right?
exactly.
Especially setting the wrong example for your kid. You just have to show up.
That's the thing. Like that's the human vessel. Like it is. These are the okay moments that like what does that trigger in me? It's like, oh, okay, that's the perfectionism that I'm healing through. That like, there is no perfection, and that's curated content. Like it's not that pretty, and that's the showing up, and that they can trust that you will be there, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when it's and the new one, it's not new, but the most recent one that I keep hearing is like we are born in chaos and blood and guts and messy, right? Like that is the human evolution of birth, is it's messy. And so that's okay. That's the purest of it all, really. And so it's healing that in the mess of it, is building that trust and that connection, is, and that looks like forgiveness and patience and
Vulnerability.
vulnerability. Oh, I say vulnerability is like the new sexy. I mean, I just think because it takes so much courage to be vulnerable,
No,
right?
you're so right, though. You're so right.
It's because we've been conditioned our whole life to stay small and don't air your dirty laundry and don't do this and say people please, and be sure you're not saying no to yourself when you're saying yes to somebody else. Just being vulnerable and is hard to say no sometimes, and that's okay. Like to ourselves, like it's also important to model that because if we're not saying no and holding the boundaries for ourselves, then our kids get the burden of that also.
Well,
And then
and
they get the burnt out
yeah.
parent.
Well, and that's the thing. We're the first role models, not only just of attachment, but of relationship, of love, of consistency, of like all those things. And like, I always tell, like, on a side note too, I always tell people when you have a kid who's grade school, right? It is so important for you to honor their vacations as vacations because otherwise they're not going to know how to take a break, right? And we as adults, we're in hustle culture all the time, right? It's so hard for us to do it because we were always shamed when we were like taking a break and reading during spring break and doing whatever. But now it's like I try to remind parents that it's like the pace and the rate and the acknowledgement you have of like where your kid's at is going to set the tone for them forever. Right.
Oh
So,
my
like,
God,
if we can acknowledge vacations, if we can acknowledge that weekends should be times of rest, if we can acknowledge that like hobbies are just as important as academics,
for sure.
right? We are showcasing this wholeness through life and not just being a mechanism for somebody else's capitalistic gain.
Oh my gosh, that is so good. Yes. Oh my gosh. And that is so that is so important, especially because the piece that you said, if we don't take the vacation like while we're on vacation, and then you need a vacation from the vacation because it was just like it was all hustle, Huge important piece that you said is to be able to give yourself permission to rest and take that time and not feel judgment. And the hustle culture is, the more you do, the better you are. No. So again, these are like simple concepts, but are they easy to implement? No, they take practice. And it takes, it's the onion of undoing all the things that, we grow up like and part of my connected parent and I've gone through and my dedication to my mom in this book is that she was a workaholic
Mm.
because she did the opposite of her mom. And these are the generations. Like my grandmother was an immigrant and barely spoke English and didn't work and never drove. And my mother was like determined to be successful and never to be that woman that couldn't drive and didn't do this and didn't do that and whatever. And so I grew up desperately seeking mom because she was a workaholic. And so there's all kinds of, you know, dysfunction. It doesn't have to look like alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of it. And um, so part of that is hardwired into me as, you know, the doing more to be loved, right? It's like, and that's why I say, like, if we don't become the connected parent at home, they seek it externally because that's the void that we're missing. And, and it is, there are generations of this. I mean, again, we could go on forever because there's
I have to let you go in a minute, but I was like, I could literally talk with you forever about all these things because it's just so like, it's so complicated and it's messy and it's chaotic. And it's like, we want things to just be so clear, right? But like, I feel like when we're looking for something that just is like, tell us how to do this thing, it minimizes like your experiences. And like I always say, like we are a collective of the experiences that we've had, right? So like when you're looking at me and you're just saying, give me a strategy, and it's like, okay, bet, but like you have 17 perspectives on this thing that I'm gonna say that come from different areas, and like I don't know, it's
yeah.
chaos. It's messy chaos. And like I think the biggest thing is that like when you're in the middle of a storm, like you find the lighthouse. And I think people like you, people like me, people that are like out here being like, we want to help you, like we can be the lighthouse, right? We can't maybe shift the entire storm, but we can be some hope. We can be some help. We can like help you kind of get to like whatever that next level is in this like very short journey of like raising children.
Yeah, you're like quoting me. I have that in my book. Like we are the lighthouse.
Oh, meant to be.
I know, because yes, I mean we are essentially their lighthouse. I mean, and or the lighthouse for the people that need to get the help. And it is messy, and that's why I really want to normalize it. And I feel like this is the great awakening for parents and for the world, especially that, it's destigmatizing the fact that it's okay to get help and that help is out there and we are, there there are trained professionals, and there's also, like we've been in the thick of it also.
Yep.
We've been in like, and that's the other thing, is like we've been in the shoes. Um, so coming from that relatable experience is profound, and it's also the confirms the fact that you're not alone.
And you don't have to do it alone. We are here.
Oh my gosh, so good. There's so much good here.
I
I
know.
love it.
Me too. I was like, I literally could talk to you forever.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me, and for hosting this platform, and for bringing me on, and for just a genuine, I know, like we were like sisters from different misters. We're like definitely kindred spirits. Like we could definitely talk all day, and I'm just so grateful that you gave me the opportunity to be here with you, and share my book and my passion, and be a support for your audience. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for opening this up for me.